Hi, my name is Tim. I come from the CluedIn team, and today I'm going to be talking about ERP and how MDM plays a role in many different parts of enterprise resource planning. I personally have been involved in many ERP projects, coming from the angle of master data management. Many of our customers here at CluedIn are either have begun or in the middle of their ERP, maybe migration or implementation programs while they are doing their CluedIn implementation as well. Today, I'm going to talk you through what role, critical, that MDM plays in ERP success, and also take you through a little bit of I guess, a demonstration of the value specifically that MDM can provide to accelerate the ERP projects. So let's start off, before we dive into the demonstration, just with a couple of key insights from our team. It is actually a pretty rare, regular occasion and a regular happening that our customers have either started or are in the middle of their ERP projects when they start their CluedIn project. This usually arises because complexity starts to grow in the ERP projects. And there is a feel of budgets being squeezed. There's a feel of budgets going, blowing out, and schedules going over. And often what is cited as leading to those budgets and time issues is the complexity of the migration and integration. Typically, customers will come to us with that ERP migration project in two forms. Either they are trying to migrate many existing ERP, often legacy, into their new ERP solution. The most common that we run into are SAP, S/4HANA, and then Microsoft 365. The modules for each of these varies. A lot of it's around supply chain, a lot around materials, customers, vendors, suppliers, just to name a few. So the first big complexity is what I always describe as trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. In that often the first kind of approach that we think about is to migrate directly. So whether that is from SAP ECC 6 to S/4HANA, or maybe it's 5 and 6 to S/4HANA. It might be, AX. It might be Oracle ERP migrating into Microsoft 365. I've personally been exposed to many of these different projects with different technologies, like I've just mentioned. But there's a very, very common theme of where most of the pain actually starts to arise, and where, the speed of these implementations of ERP just slow down. And that is in the direct integrations. So the way we think about here at CluedIn and what MDM provides, was more specifically what CluedIn provides in its approach to MDM, is that instead of trying to migrate from A to B, we find a lot of success where there is, we often describe as a soft landing space that sits in between A and B. So instead of trying to fit A directly into B using lots of different ETL pipelines and have this as a big IT project, IT will still be involved, but that kind of waterfall, kind of big bang approach to integration is usually where most of the pain comes from. And some of the ways that this shines through, maybe this is a salt in the wound in a way, but painful to hear, and maybe you're experiencing this yourself. But often once these kind of ETL pipelines are set up, they become very brittle. In that every day when we walk in to work, and we ask, how did the migration go last night? It's often met with, oh, there's a few records that failed, that we need to go and update our ETL pipeline to go and cater for. And this just seems to continue and continue and continue every single day until, you kind of start to get worried about, is there light at the end of the tunnel? And this is very much, your classic waterfall big bang approach to ERP migration. CluedIn offers basically a soft landing space in between those zones where as soon as the data from the incoming ERP solution, let's call it A, is essentially dropped into CluedIn, the job of the IT team of getting the data from A into any target is done. Consider yourself done. You can now walk away, and we don't need really your help on the project anymore. And that turns things into an ELT approach where, of course, that's significantly easier to do. That is literally just about essentially pushing data as is, as raw, with all its horrible data quality, with all of its different modeling, into a more generic zone in the form of CluedIn's staging environment. And CluedIn's staging environment is very accepting of any form of data, any model, corruption of data, inconsistencies, denormalized models, all of these different things. The staging environment in CluedIn is basically this catch-all lake, if you will, that's quite accepting of data not fitting into its one or many targets. So once that's done, the process actually changes a little bit in that instead of this being a very heavily dependent IT project, it actually becomes something a little bit more operated by the actual business instead. Now, IT can help with that, but the big piece here is, and you'll see this in the demonstration, is that it's so much more of a progression over perfection process in getting that migration complete, in that we don't need jobs to run and be 100% complete and the integrity of the data to be 100% complete before it moves into its target. We can chop away at it in smaller, more approachable chunks. And think of this as the difference between Agile and Waterfall. Waterfall kind of pushed us into this. You have to do A, then you can do B, and then you can do C. Whereas CluedIn's approach to MDM is much more, we will show an end-to-end flow and then, work back from there. So in that way, it's catering for this reality of ERP that, especially with migration, where your data is not going to fit into that target model very easily. Instead of trying to, build this pipeline that solves every single possible thing that runs 100% overnight, CluedIn takes a little bit more of a realistic approach, which just says that's never going to happen. But guess what? We can load the data as is. Anything that fits in straight away to the target SAP system, you can just go in. And everything it doesn't, it's kind of in this quarantined environment where CluedIn provides a lot of great tooling to basically massage that data into its target model, and it will eventually get there, right? Now, the value of that is it's much more predictable. It's much more predictable, and it's much more reportable in that every week we can come back and we can say, good, we have another % migrated. And then next week, there's the next %. And of course, as anyone would ask, okay, so when is it going to be done and how can we get this done faster? Of course, that's where the automation pieces of CluedIn can come in to help, many of which you'll see today as well. I would say the other common use case before we dive into the demonstration for ERP and MDM coming together is in making sure that we maintain a high level of quality and accuracy in the data. And let's be honest, the ERP solution is probably going to be a lot of where our automation exists. It's going to automatically order stock. It's going to manage inventory. It's going to, even distribute automation to suppliers and third-party vendors. And it might even, send off some type of work item to a drilling site or a refinery, or in cases of some of our other customers, maybe logistics for trucks and delivery vans, you're going to want to make sure this data is of high quality. With that automation in place, you can imagine if we are automating off inaccurate data, whether it's duplicate records or just lack of quality or validation. These are things that just cost money in the end when it comes to running the logistics of the business. So CluedIn excels at making sure that any of the data in your ERP solution, even if you're building a new solution for the first time, it is pretty much a known thing that the data quality and the kind of integrity tooling inside of ERP solutions don't usually compare to something like a purpose-fit data quality or MDM tool. So I'm going to walk you through a scenario that's very common with our customers, and I'm going to show you how CluedIn can help accelerate the kind of end-to-end story when it comes to ERP. Where we're going to start in CluedIn, as I kind of alluded to before, and as I promised as well, is that we're going to start with essentially the source systems just dumping their data into the platform as is. We don't need to ask IT to prepare the data before it gets in. We don't need to ask IT to build any complex ETL pipelines and join, big long queues for or ever-growing queues that IT have usually to kind of do work. And in this case, multiple different ways that we can get data into the actual CluedIn platform. We can ingest from databases, we can import from files, we can have streaming data, we can have batch data, we can connect directly to live systems. I'm going to create a new flow where we're going to upload some data. And I'm just going to drag and drop some data on that I've prepared for you. So we've got two files simulating data from across two different systems. And in this case, we have SAP data, and we've also got some data from another ERP solution. It kind of looks like Microsoft Dynamics. And in here, we're going to essentially dump this data into CluedIn's staging environment. And let's just call this raw ERP data. And this is a folder in CluedIn's staging environment. So think of this as a place where it's not actually in the MDM system itself yet. It's in a kind of pre-staged environment. It needs essentially someone from the business to make a couple of decisions on what type of data this is and how it fits into the kind of landscape. So one of the big benefits of CluedIn's approach to MDM, and this is an understatement of how valuable this is for ERP, we can actually ingest and start processing this data in any order that we want. Any order. I could have taken the SAP file first. I could have taken this file here first. It doesn't matter. CluedIn's always going to generate and produce the same exact results, no matter the order of this data. And why this is really important is that often priorities change, and then often we can't always control, when we have access to data. So instead of having to wait for data sets or waiting on queues for IT to get you exports of data or get that data to the CluedIn platform, you can basically take it as it comes. So there's a big efficiency gain in the reality of large enterprises that is often understated with this simple fact that CluedIn actually exclusively has compared to other MDM vendors. So here we've got 25 rows of data, and we can go in and we can take a look at the kind of data we're working with here, excuse me. So it looks like we're dealing with some materials. It looks like we're dealing with actually some food, chocolate chips, pastry cream, etc. And on kind of simple, just visually looking at the data, it doesn't look too sinister. I mean, to be honest, it's a little bit weird. We've got hotel as a category. We're clearly missing some weights in here, but it looks like it's actually buried in the material name. It looks like the volume is being represented in different ways for what is effectively the same thing. And this is just casting an eye over it. You know, obviously with we've got a page 2, so let's go and show 50 of these records. Obviously, there's also some oddities around spikes. So I would argue these are kind of potentially anomalies in data where we've got this net weight for strawberry filling, but the gross weight is quite small and the volume is quite small. So there's obviously some variety of issues to do with this, even this particular one data source, let alone that actually, you know, we have the same materials across different ERP solutions that we need to bring together. And one of the ways that CluedIn really starts to shine, especially in ERP, is we have our Copilot that can essentially help end users translate what they need to do next. You know, our Copilot is hooked into some pretty advanced models, and it allows that common communication. So we can say things like, hi, can you help me fix DQ issues, right? Now, this is that kind of, I guess you could say, this is that banter you would be used to if you're using something like a ChatGPT or a Gemini or something like a Copilot. And that's great. But I think where the value of MDM and CluedIn starts to shine is we can actually ask it questions about the data we're looking at here. So we can ask it something like, tell me about this data set that we're looking at. And not only is it aware enough that it says, well, you know, it's able to do the translation of what is this actually asking me to do? What does this mean? And you can see it's activated this particular skill that CluedIn has to describe, you know, data sets and, you know, which is common information that you would want to know. And what I'm hoping is that this can not only help me with the process of mapping this data into CluedIn with the whole idea of the target system of where we're going, might be SAP, but help me along the way to even get to that point. So here, it looks like it's said, first of all, it looks like the business domain is pertaining to food production or manufacturing business domain, and I would tend to agree. It looks like there's identifiers. You might need to use the material's name. However, note that different materials can have the same name, so it might not be globally unique. And you can just tell this is smart. This is really good. This is true. There is no ID in this data. I might need CluedIn to actually generate brand new identifiers here. It's gone through and it's described all of the different column names and things like this. But it also has highlighted some of those data quality issues we saw visually with our eyes. So what we picked up before. So it looks like this volume unit is inconsistent. It also is recommending we put some validation checks on some of this data as well. So this is really great because the next step I need to do is I need to tell CluedIn what type of data that we're actually dealing with here. So this is materials. And as we type materials, and I'll go back just a little bit, you can see that it's coming up with some domain suggestions. So CluedIn ships out of the box with very common business domains. And here I'm just going to create a brand new domain called material. We're going to give it a nice little icon. So let's just do something like this. And then we're going to describe essentially what we call a vocabulary. So think of this like a structure of the data that's coming in. So we're going to call it a material, and it's going to give us this nice view of what's the data coming in. It's going to, once we create the mapping, show me a nice visualization of essentially what we're doing here. And what we're doing is we're basically onboarding data from somewhere, some internal system, some, you know, ERP system that we need to migrate. And it's visually telling me that I'm moving from this into the concept of materials. That's kind of what we want. That's something easier for the business to deal with. Instead of having to deal with files and tables and SAP and Dynamics, I want to be dealing with business domains. It's something that's much easier to actually understand. So here, as we go into the mapping, this is the first chance that we get to essentially, as I alluded to before, quarantine data that doesn't look right. So imagine something like a net weight, right? If you notice before in the data, there was actually some values that didn't even have any values at all. This is a classic example of something that would just fail being inserted into a target ERP system. So instead of trying to solve that all in code and ETL pipelines that become very hard to manage pretty quickly, we can set this rule up here. So there are inbuilt rules. So simple ones like, where the value is empty. I would actually like to quarantine this data. Okay. So what I'm saying is, listen, if this is empty, there's no use it going any further. It's going to fail in that target system. So let's put it up to the side and give someone, including some tooling, to go off and address those issues. Now, there's two common ways to address that. One, we actually have to go to some expert within the business and ask them what it is. Another way could be that there's maybe some way to automate this. Maybe there's a way to extrapolate or impute from other values that we have here. And maybe we just have to create a ticket that says, can someone fill this in? And once they filled it in, it's going to get filled in, and then we can go into the MDM system, and therefore it's going to be easier to get into that target system. So what about some of these more complex things? So for example, imagine something like, maybe a material name needs to just be in the format of characters. It can't have numbers in it. Well, when you go to here and you look at the pre-built filters, or maybe there actually isn't a filter that's pre-built for this. And for this, there are lots of different techniques. There's the use of our AI-generated rules. Some of you might be used to building things like regular expressions. Well, between you and me, I rarely know how to build these things. And therefore, having a co-pilot that can actually, you can chat to, for example, can you build me a regular expression for a value that just has, I don't know, what is it, characters, alpha bet characters in it. They can be uppercase or lower case. So notice spelling mistakes and all that, this is basically just as an end user that's not technical, you're given this nice way, and I actually know this is correct, but notice that it's also describing all of the different pieces as well. So you can really understand how this makes the process easier for a non-technical person. So once we go into the next stage of mapping, you can see that CluedIn has automatically used the Copilot's suggestion to use the material name. However, it was a little bit hesitant about the material name as an ID. So what it's actually done is it's suggested we automatically generate IDs here. So once again, you can see pretty smart. We're going to click Next, Finish, and then I'm done with this data being in the staging environment. Think of this as a way for me to go, all right, so for the records that are past the quality checks, feel free to go in. For everything else, you will be quarantined. And so this is going to push 25 of these records in, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll capture some of these issues early. Okay, so it looks like it's quarantined one of the records, but 24 have gone quite happily into the actual platform itself. Over here in my quarantine, I can actually see that record that was quarantined. And if I click on the details, we can see it was because this particular rule here. So this was the empty value for the net weight. And so we can go and fix this within this platform. We can go and use the tooling that's available here. For right now, I'm just going to leave it here in the quarantine section because there's already a lot of data that's come through to the platform that we can kind of set off to the target system itself. Okay. So let's go and change this search view. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to load all of the properties for that vocabulary called material. And here we can see we've got our data in the platform. We can see it's even got all of its data quality issues still. Now, this is the interesting part and where CluedIn absolutely shines. I'm not going to fix any of this data. And just like I alluded to before with ERP and not being this kind of waterfall implementation, not being this kind of, everything has to be clean before we get it out. There is definitely a validity in thinking like this, knowing that, I have to clean it because I know if I try to send it out to the target ERP solution, it's going to fail anyway. And you would be right. However, often what that sacrifices is that we don't see any progress on the migration at all, i.e. the records that are fine and are ready to go are usually sent over in a big batch. We're kind of hoping that it just all, goes through in one nice big transaction. And my experience anyway has been that has happened all of 0 times in working with the ERP projects alongside the CluedIn customers. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually get this data out to its target. So in this case, this could be all different types of locations, but I would strongly recommend it's not directly to the actual target ERP system itself. Rather, it's often better, just like we're saying with the import of data, it should land in a nice place in CluedIn, a soft landing space. Very similar to that, it should land on the way out in a very generic data place, where if we do need other teams to do anything, it's not necessarily they know anything about CluedIn. Rather, they can use in tools and environments that they're very used to. And if we spit this out to something like a data lake or a SQL Server, you can probably imagine there's lots of people in the world that know how to use those. And of course, lots of tooling technologies integrate with those as well. So I'm just going to hook this up to a SQL database. And let's try this one. Let's see if this connection works. Yeah, connection looks good. And let's add that in. So now I've got this place that data can go to after it's gone through CluedIn. And as I said, the eventual target will be an ERP solution, but often we like to put this little step in between to act as this generic data environment that other teams can pick this data up and maybe even do a little bit more to the data. For sending the data, we are actually going to send it now with all of the data quality issues still in it. Okay, so we're creating a new flow called clean and consolidated materials. We haven't even brought on the second data set yet, right? And you would argue, oh, that's it's going to be a nightmare where we go to look at the second file. And the truth is, usually it is. CluedIn's approach makes this very simple to change and adapt once you learn more. And you can just imagine, instead of trying to fit all the sources into your brain of how it's going to fit together or build these very complex diagrams and things like this, not that those hurt, but often they get pretty complex to wield. And if you have new people come onto the project, it's kind of very hard to upskill those people on these complex models. Instead, CluedIn takes a very simple approach and a great approach to this as well. So here's the data we're going to share. So instead of talking about SAP or Dynamics, all I'm wanting to do is push out the records that are materials, okay? Notice there was 24 here in the lookup, and that's because one of those was quarantined back in the staging environment. We'll get back to that in a second. So here I'm going to save. We can then choose where this data is actually supposed to go, okay? So here we've got our reference data. Chances are I didn't actually get my, let's go have a look. Maybe I didn't get my password correct. Yes, I think that's the old one. Let's try this one and save. And let's test. That looks better. And let's go back to my stream. And then hopefully this is all, oh, it's still, 1 second, let me get my password. All right. So this is probably always the hardest part of remembering what your password was. And of course, this time it's no different. Let's go here and let's go to here. Let's see if this works. Okay, that was not the password I was thinking, so that makes sense. So if I go here, I'll go there, test the connection. That looks good. Okay, much better. So I've now got this healthy connection to the database. So this is where we're going to send the data, and I'm just going to send it to a place called clean materials. So in the form of SQL Server, if this table doesn't exist, CluedIn is going to manage the creation for it. So if it does already exist, it's going to hook into it. So we can click next. Here, it's going to ask me what types of properties that I'm wanting to share out to that target system. And I'm just going to choose CluedIn. Can you just choose the material properties we have today? You can see they're all coming out here. We're going to save. And we're going to take a look at the preview. So let's go to the data. So we can actually see before we start it, this is the data that's going out. It's still got all these horrible values in it. What else is here? Looks bad. Of course, we have those anomalies. It looks like dough is spelt multiple ways. Let's go look at what other issues that we have. I think we spotted something like, where was it? There was something like a hotel somewhere. Maybe that was the quarantine. It was the quarantine record. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to start this guy up. And so in the world of ERP, records that will make it in, will make it in. Records that don't will fail entry. And instead of making this we've got to run the job overnight again to get those small little fixes, you'll find we can fix a lot of these issues right here in the CluedIn platform itself. So first of all, why don't we go and fix one of these issues, and then we're going to onboard that other data from another ERP solution to show you how easy it is to kind of bring this data together. I think where I'm going to start is I'm going to create a brand new cleaning project. So the place where we can clean data, we're going to call clean materials. Here, the type of data we want to clean is where the type equals to a material, of which we have 24. And then it's going to ask me what properties we're wanting to clean. Now, I can be very selective. I could only, bring in the volume or the material name. In this case, I'm going to bring in everything because I'm really not aware yet of where the data quality issues all are. You could see the Copilot before very early on actually told me where they were, and maybe that's a good place to start. But let's have a look what this tool can help us do. So I'm going to generate these results. We'll click confirm. This is going to spin me up a data stewarding environment. So this is really nice because this environment doesn't require me to be technical, doesn't require us to go back to IT. It can actually fix a lot of the issues we've got here in records that won't make it into its target system. And more importantly, once we fix an issue, it will remember how to fix it. So we only need to fix an issue once. And then it remembers how to fix that issue in the future. So you can imagine from an acceleration perspective and an overall how much manual work are you doing? You're doing less and less and less over time as we're building up this big repository of automation. So this is going to load up my data. And here why don't we start by fixing this volume unit? Because I can see there's all these different ways that people are entering this data from the incoming system. I'm actually going to click this little drop down here, and I'm going to ask it to show me the distribution of what do we have here. It's very, very obvious here that there's all these gross ways that people are representing this. Well, the problem is when this gets to lots and lots of values, it's really hard to spot where those data quality issues are. And this is why we can use this clustering feature. Because as we go through the different techniques, you'll notice that they all start to pick up these kind of suggestions. In this case, it's saying, I think we should change all of these into this. As a non-technical user, we can ask it to do this. And not only will that fix those records, so see, we can see that now it looks a little bit nicer, but as we go to push these changes back into the MDM solution, we can also ask CluedIn to remember this. So here it's saying, do you want me to build a rule based off what you just told me? And so the value of this being, we basically only needed to tell the engine once how to fix those issues. And now CluedIn's going to remember it. So within a matter of seconds, not only have we fixed the records in the MDM platform, but our downstream system is also receiving that clean data. Those records can now go into the target SAP system because, you know, they have to go into that system in some type of standard. And if we go back to our cleaning project, we can see if we head under rules, that just a few seconds ago, CluedIn created this automatic rule that we can look together at now. So as we open this, this is something that is auditable, traceable, and understandable by any audience. So here we can see a rule that says where the volume unit equals this bad version, or this one, or this one, or this one, and so on, there's a known action here, an automation that says, oh, by the way, if you see any of those ever again, change it back to this ML, because that's what we need out in the target systems. So obviously, this is a kind of rule I would think of activating, right? And it doesn't matter really now where the data comes from. If we ever see that for a volume unit again, it knows exactly what to do. Now, the first question people will ask is, what happens if there's another variation? And turns out we can use AI to also automate a lot of this as well. But it's always good to get these deterministic things in place, and that way we don't always have to use AI for everything. So that's great. We've got data in, we've got data out. We've even cleaned some of the data, which has now automated business rules so they never happen again. Let's head back to our data source, because let's onboard that SAP dataset. So under raw ERP, we've now got these SAP standard materials. And as you would kind of expect, here's another 25 rows of data. So let's go and take a look. In this case, we've got different column names. I mean, I know these because I've worked with SAP so much now, but I'm sure most people wouldn't have any idea what these mean. In this data, it looks like we've got the same types of materials. We've got cocoa powder, fruit jam, etc. But in this case, we've got IDs. We didn't have that in the other system. It also looks like we've got the same types of data. So potentially these are actually duplicate materials. Here we've got the volume. So if we ever saw, you know, ML, M.L, we saw it in this data, it would be automatically fixed by our business rule. But one of the first problems, I guess, what I would say is, how do I map this into the same concept of material? Do I need to translate all of these columns? Do I need to map the semantics? Do I need to talk to anyone in the business around what's SAP and all of that? Well, this is once again where our Copilot becomes just priceless. So here we are going to ask it something. We're going to ask it, can you suggest a mapping from this data set to our material entity type we just created and our material vocabulary that we just created before? And obviously what I'm wanting it to do is kind of do that mapping for me of, material, let's go over to the left a little bit, MAKTX, that should be material name. and things like MATKL, that's category or whatever it was in the previous file that we uploaded. There's also examples where some of these columns don't even exist in our previous mapping, and so I'd want it to help me with that. And so here you can kind of see it's the fantastic job. So it says, oh, by the way, MAKTX, that's material name. That's we already know about that you already uploaded that. And same thing for unit of measure and gross weight and net weight and volume and all of these kind of things as well. So I can actually ask this to map this data in. And so let's do it. So can you create a mapping from this data set to our material entity type and material vocabulary? So I don't just want the suggestions. I actually wanted to go off and create this mapping for me as well. Why is this important? Because at the end, one of the things that we want to do is we want to be speaking the same language out the other end. So we want material name to be the same, consistent across no matter where the data came in from itself. And so this is really going to help us with that kind of acceleration as new data sets come on. We don't always have to go back to the business and ask them to unravel all these complexities of system column names and things like this. So could you please specify which of these should be the mapping? So it should be the material. It should be that. I think that's what we call it. Oh, did we not? Let's have a look. What did I call it? So let's go here and let's go here. Material. Oh, that looks good. Let's try it again. So try again. We can come back to this in a second once it's given a go, but let's map this data in. And let's choose, actually, let's see what it does. Let's see it. It seems like an entity type with a name already exists, which caused the creation. Yes, so if you want mapping to existing entity type, ensure the exact name is KCS. Okay, well, let's use the suggestions. We can use the suggestions that are brought, and let's go here. And this is a material. Now, the concept of material already exists, okay? So we can map to the same thing. In this case, we're going to create a new vocabulary called SAP material. And that's because it's got different column names. And we want to map that lineage. We want to be able to say that values come in with the name of column name of MAKTX, and then it's mapped into the concept of a material. So let's go ahead and do that. Our mapping is done. So we can do the mapping now. We can do it later. I think just because we've seen the Copilot and what it does, let's go ahead and add a mapping. And let's choose material name. I think that's what the Copilot is saying. Great. And we'll go next. Now here, we'll want to use the material name as the display name. However, here for the ID, there was this material number that was used as an identifier. Unfortunately, the other file didn't have identifiers, but I'm hoping when I merge these together, now my materials will at least have one identifier that's come from a source system. So let's click process. And this time, we're not going to put any data quality checks in. We're just going to see what happens when we push the data as is. So I can help fill in the gaps a little bit for you as this is processing. So we push 25 records in, which also means that there's 25 new records that have been pushed out to that target system. So now there's 50 records that are out in that target system. Unfortunately, this is not what I want. It turns out these are the same materials from across different systems, and one of my goals is to blend them together, build golden records out of the materials. So if we go up to our search at the top, there should be 49 of these materials, one that's still quarantined. And if we go here, we can see we've got our 49 materials in the system, but you can clearly see multiple cocoa powders and things like this. This is not what I want. So for this, I can head over to my deduplication engine, and we're going to match these materials. So here I'm going to set up a project that is about getting and finding material duplicates we're going to create. And in here, we can set up these matching rules that allow us to find where these possible matches are. Now, I'm just going to keep it simple for now. I'm just going to match up the name. But you can have all different types of complex matching rules here, pretty sophisticated ones, things like fuzzy matching. We also have the use of AI to be able to do some of these checks. For this, I'm going to just use the property name. And we're going to check if there's a match, maybe like a 95% match. I don't think case should have anything to do with the match. I don't think white space should. I'm going to remove punctuation. Let's just stick with that for now. So now that I've got my matching rules up, I can ask the engine to go off and find records that match this kind of structure, that match these matching rules. And this is going to come back and it's going to report how many groups that it's found. It looks like it's already found some groups here. What it allows me to do is go into these here, and I can see this side-by-side view that's actually showing me the three materials that have been side-by-side. Now you might ask, weren't there two data sources? Well, this is everything's materials now. So this is finding matches within materials, right? It doesn't have to, find matches just in one or each of the other files. It's not just about finding matches across files. It's now materials itself. So it's done a rather good job. So here I can choose what I want to do. In this case, I might even want to reject this, but this is definitely not a duplicate. These are definitely separate properties. And you can see that this particular cluster has reached the state of rejected. But I might want to go into something like the cake mix here. And when I look at this, I can say, well, very clearly, these are the same materials. So I can either choose one particular record to be the golden record, or I can actually chop and change values from across the different systems themselves. So we have full control over what we want to do in this particular case. Here, I'm going to let the AI do a little bit of the checking for me. I'm going to click Next and Approve. So I've now marked this as a true duplicate record. And for the others, I'm just going to also mark them all as approved as well. Let's do that. And I'm now going to ask it to merge all of these. So I'm going to actually ask it to do the work of consolidating these records into individual golden records now. So I click confirm. This is going to go off and do that work. Now, the good part is, as I'm doing this work, the downstream target ERP system is getting all my fixes. So it's getting the right actions to go and say, oh, we've put too many records in the ERP solution. So remove the old one and then replace it with this merged record. And you can see how this is kind of now a process. This is now, instead of these kind of overnight jobs, we can show incremental wins by pushing data quality fixes, duplicate records in this case. And if we head over to our search and head to our filter, I'm going to filter by our materials. And you can see there are a few less materials now. Looks like there's now 32 materials. Where now the records have kind of been merged from across these different sources. So let's do one more thing before we finish. Notice this dough and dough. Now, the funny thing is, this is going to be hard to pick up these issues because they don't necessarily show any signs or patterns or deterministic logic. This is where, for example, if we launch into this key here, this is where AI becomes invaluable in CluedIn. And when it comes to ERP, I'd say this kind of thing happens more than any other project that we do or use case that we do work on here at CluedIn. So here I can ask it, can you spot any anomalies in this vocabulary key that we're looking at? Now we go to our all values. we can see, well, I would say there's some misspellings of dough. This is obviously from Simpsons, dough with an exclamation mark. And so these are oddities that are hard to pick up with traditional MDM tools. And you can see how well the platform has picked up these particular heuristic issues that don't show any patterns itself. And what we can actually do now is we can say, okay, well, great. Can you build golden record rules for each of these issues and tag with I don't know, bad category. Seems like a better tag than anything else. And so what this is doing is now we're turning something heuristic into something very deterministic, in that we've got these rules that we can now have that say, if I spot things like this, I'm going to tag it with an issue, and I'm going to federate off that to be handled by some end user to go off and fix these particular issues. So to kind of close up here, and what we've just shown is the importance of offering technology that allows, you know, bad data to come in and good data to progressively come out. We've shown how that kind of agile approach to MDM makes it much simpler to scale ERP success, where we don't have to get everything perfect and upfront before we get any value or any data into the SAP system. We've seen here how we can use things like AI to accelerate describing data, building business rules as a simple example. We've seen how it can detect anomalies. We can see how our data cleaning tool can spot the issues, fix them, and also automate the business rules off it. We've been able to spot duplicates. We've been able to work with heterogeneous data formats and heterogeneous data structures that don't match or overlap. We've had the AI help us translate from complex systems like SAP into a uniform model. And these are just a shorthand few things of the way that CluedIn can help in ERP types of situations. So hopefully this helped.